Hello, welcome and thank you for joining me. This is Andrew Frank. We're doing a quick little overview of the BodyTrack monitor for bed. In a previous video, I showed how the data port and sensor should be set up. So the power supply should be plugged in the back of the data port, and the USB cable of the bed, or any other sensor for that matter, should be plugged into the data port top left corner. And then in the wireless settings on your tablet itself, under WLAN here, you'll see the data ports comes up as data port F111DF, and that's good. And then we're going to go to the software itself, the BodyTrack software. So here's BodyTrack bed monitor. So when you launch it, you're going to get this notation, or notification, sorry, and you click retry connection, and it's going to go through the process of trying to connect to the data port. So it may take a few seconds to just let it do its work here to try to get it, and you can retry if it doesn't get it the first time. Of course, this worked for me perfectly the first time I did it. And we're there. Now, connection established. And note in the top right corner it says data port, and it matches the number that you saw on your wireless screen. So I'm going to reset this quickly. You have a 2-hour timer down here. This can be set in reset to whatever you like in settings. We'll go into that a little bit later. So here is the basic screen of the BodyTrack monitor. So if I press on it now, there's a mat that I'm working with right now. And it's just the standard pressure mapping display that you would expect. Your pressure range is set from 5 to 75 millimeters of mercury. And then you have also what we call a risk tab. We'll talk about that in more detail. But this risk tab, instead of saying millimeters of mercury, you'll notice it says millimeters of mercury per hour. It's a calculated curve based on the Resnick-Rogers curve, and that is a curve that describes human tissue's tolerance to pressure as pressure over time. So high pressures for short periods of time, lower pressures for longer periods of time. So this is a calculator that's calculating how much pressure is on the body and how long it's been there, and if it crosses that Resnick-Rogers curve, it will alarm. So that's a useful tool. This will start to show green and yellow and then red where the load is for extended periods of time. Then you have gradient. Now gradient is an interesting tool. There's a lot of talk about shear. Unfortunately, there's no good clinically useful shear sensors out there. We had a good research tool for about 15 years, but it's just really difficult to do the work. And the ISO committees basically on seating and on bed said, you know what, why don't we just calculate the gradient, which is how fast pressure moves from one point to another across the sensor. So if this were the 3D representation, this would be a really high mountain peak, and we're basically calculating the slope, how steep is the mountain from low pressures here to really high pressures there. And the higher the pressures, the steeper the mountain, and the more risk that tissue is being displaced. And that is a prime indicator of shear. So one of the things to keep in mind about shear is you don't have to worry so much about shear if you've done a good job managing the pressure distribution across the surface. It only happens where there's big pressure differentials. So then we have ability to take a snapshot, to review some pictures, to flip from one end to the other of the bed. So I can flip this from one end to the other, and mute and reset for the alarms here. You also have average pressure numbers here and max pressure, etc. So that's kind of a quick overview of the system, and we'll go into more detail with other features in another video here in just a little bit.